Racers Marshall Pruitt. Everything we're doing this weekend at the second Indianapolis Grand Prix brought to us by Skip Barber Racing School. I have an old friend of mine, doesn't mean you're old, just means we've been friends for a long time. Super mechanic, super rear tire changer, Kyle Sagan. Also doing a cool new thing through your Instagram as well, trying to get folks bringing into the mechanic's life and share some of those tales. So I had a great question from an IndyCar fan. She said, hey, understand a lot of the things you use on pit lane, right? The refueling probe, I get that, fuel goes into the car. Understand the tires and what, but there's a lot of other stuff that gets used, whether it's during a race, during a practice session. Could you show that to us? So I said, how about a show and tell with Kyle Sagan here? And so he's going to be kind enough to show us some of the things that help them to facilitate a weekend in particular with your championship leading number 10 Chip Ganassi Racing Honda. Most importantly, plucking my heartstrings because my wife's a Marine. American Legion, BeTheOne.org.
Proud to wear it.
Trying to save some lives here. Kyle, why don't you walk us through some of what we're looking at here? Wheel guns, for example. I think folks know what these are, but these aren't off the shelf. Go to your local parts store, made by Paoli. Oh, they cost 2 or 3 times as much the average American's rent would be per month.
Yeah, I could buy 2 or 3 of my cars with one of those things for sure.
Pick that up and show us this hot rod, because it's customized with grip tape and all kinds of stuff.
This is our practice gun, and shuttle shoots direction on which way we want to go. We have it set up for a right-hand wheel gunner. So shuttle down, wheel nut comes off. Drop the wheel gun on the ground, and it goes the other direction. So we don't have to change it.
Is the Hurricane logo a nickname for you, how fast you are changing
No,
wheel?
The Hurricanes, that's the model of the gun. That means that's the big bad Bama Jamma right there.
Okay.
And,
but look at the customization too here with the grip tape on where exactly you need it and such.
Right, so for the race gun itself, we'll have grip tape on the trigger, we'll have more around the bell, and everything will be nice and shiny and cleaned up. For the practice gun, they get beat up a little bit.
Sure, but look at them, also show folks the machined socket here.
So the wheel nut actually gets held in by the O-ring, and it also has magnets on the face of the socket as well that help hold the wheel nut into the socket so it doesn't come out as we drop it on the ground.
And these take a bit of punishment too. That's why you see some scrapes. And granted, these cost a lot. They're super high tech for the need at hand here, but they also can take a punch.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
What's next on the show and tell?
We have the air jack here. This is the practice air jack, so it's a lot shorter than a race air jack. It'll probably be 2 or 3 times as long. And then we have the slow valve, which actually control the car coming up and down slowly in pit lane.
So you'll insert the air jack wand.
Correct.
Right? Get the car up in the air.
Correct.
Lock that charge into the system.
Correct.
Disconnect the hose.
Yep.
Then you have that valve to open slowly if and when you want to set the car down on stands or something like that.
And the nice part about that as well too is when you can pull that off, you don't have a hose in the back of the car. So when you're trying to walk around the back, you're not going to trip on the hose or break it off the back of the car. So that's nice. Otherwise, if you didn't have this and you pull the air jack out, the car's going to drop to the ground, and that's not the most comfortable thing in the world for the driver and the car.
I'd like to say that they came up with that valve because of me. I probably tripped over that hose like 20 times when I was a mechanic. So it's a Pruitt idiot rule here, I think.
Right. So then next we have the starter motor itself.
Now, this is not only a large piece of equipment, it's not exactly light, and it also feeds a ton of torque. We understand this to start the engine, but also explain, brother, this piece down here, because that is critical. Otherwise, you might take your hands off of your arm.
I mean, literally, there's so much power that is required to turn the motor over that if you didn't have that arm, you literally could not hold on to it.
And so this side of the starter, this piece here actually gets rested. You can see it's a little flat on the bottom. That rests on the ground to provide some stabilization there.
Right, correct. And it's on a 36-volt system, so it's really pumping some power to get that motor turned over.
And we would be remiss if we didn't point out how awesome the branding as well, not only BeTheOne.org, but also the most important part here, because veteran suicide is indeed something that we are trying to prevent, save a veteran. So you aren't kidding when you say how proud you are, and the entire 10-car team.
Absolutely.
You're doing really important stuff on top of trying to win motor races. blowing is also something you're extremely
Blowing's
good at,
very important.
Kyle Sagan. We're talking about cooling things, though.
Wow.
That being, show us what we have here, because there's an array of air movement devices.
Right, so one of the things that they talked about last week in Nashville was the heat soaking of the car when the driver was sitting in pit lane. And that's everything. When the car stops rolling and there's no air moving through it, everything heats up tremendously. So we have specific brake blowers,
When the car
for each
comes
corner
to a
of the
stop,
car.
that's the first bit, more or less
We'll
the first thing
actually
that happens.
slide those into the brake scoop itself, so it gets the most amount of cooling it can get, and it runs off a nice little rechargeable battery. Same thing for our electronics coolers. They have inlets in the front of the underwing in the car where we can actually run blowers to keep all the electronics cool, because they get really hot.
And what about drivers, the whiny, complaining drivers?
Yes, they've got air conditioning units that they can put in their fire suits or just blow it on their face, whatever they need.
And you and
But this is actual air conditioning.
your fellow crew members are so nice. You want to make sure this is always working for your driver.
100%.
So when they're on track, many of
100%.
you will just make sure it's working the whole time, because
Yes.
you'd never want it to fail.
And always make sure the dead end is very clean and not messed with.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true
See,
too.
more front brake ducting as well.
Yes, for
cooling
the
there.
front brake ducts, those hang on the front scoops, and the same thing as the rear. They'll keep the fronts as cool as possible.
So we have one more thing, because especially in this modern era, folks always want to look at their phone and their screen, always keep themselves active. In theory, this item is supposed to be showing Alex Palou timing and scoring info.
Yeah, I think
but
it's
there's also
Tetris. We should-
streaming Netflix and a few other things. Tell folks about this, because this is another item that gets dropped into the cockpit.
Literally, it's for timing and scoring for the driver to keep an eye on everything he wants to see with the other cars on track. So this will actually rest in the cockpit.
Custom-made carbon
Correct.
mount for this to sit right on
So
top.
he actually doesn't have to hold it, which we don't want him to do. We want him to be as comfortable as possible, right? So that'll sit basically in front of the steering wheel, and he can watch what's going on track with the other drivers.
And we'll close on this. It's kind of sad. We like Alex. We consider him to be fairly smart. The guy constantly forgets his name. So the team does all they can to help him remember his name, so he knows who he is when he gets in and out of the car. Kyle Sagan, Rockstar, where should folks find your IG content, Life of a Race Car Mechanic? What should they be looking for?
Life Over the Wall on Instagram, or K_Sagan on Twitter, and trying to put up as much racing stuff as I can, and going to branch out to not only myself but other people in pit lane if they're willing, and try and describe more of what happens in pit lane and kind of show the world of what we do, because it's awesome.
One of my favorite people right here, Brother Kyle.
Likewise.
There we go.